Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Ruben.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tundu.
Good morning.
Good morning, Leila.
I'm loving this lilac. And you're pastored as well this morning.
What?
Pastel.
Pastel colors.
Oh, okay.
You know, you've been angry to join me in the pastoral work. I don't know whether the cares of this world will allow you. But you can join me with the task. Let's
So what do you have for us?
Yes, a lot, Ruben. Let's start with these day newspapers. Imo, ignoring Supreme Court principle. PDP asks Chief Justice of Nigeria 6 orders to step aside, demands reconstitution of panel to hear the Hejoha's application. You've been dealing with this all morning, Ruben, Tundu, and Leila. Are they likely to be biased if the same set of justices look at this matter? That is the claim the PDP they're trying to make, the position they're taking. If I was reading the definition of likely bias by late Nikki Toby, then when he made this declaration, it was Justice of the Court of Appeal. And this is one of the various cerebral persons that graced the Supreme Court. Recall Ruben was a professor of law and Dean of Faculty when we were at the University of Calabar.
Yes.
Years later, I became also Dean of Faculty at the University of Maiduguri. So he gave definitions.
Are you quoting him because he was our teacher?
Yeah, well, no, but I think
I'm just pulling you.
yes, his definitions seem to be very germane at this point. Amongst other definitions, let me just take it from the beginning. Etymologically, bias means slant, personal inclination or preference, a one-sided inclination. It also means a preconceived opinion, a predisposition to decide a cause or an issue in a certain way, which does not leave the mind perfectly open to conviction. Bias creates a condition of mind which sways judgment and renders his functions impartially in particular case. I don't know whether these justices haven't given the first judgment, and you are now asking them to check.
I think it's actually impossible if you gave the first judgment to look at it with fresh eyes, which is why the locus classicus, Johnson and Lawson, demands a fresh panel. That, for me, is common sense. The case you just cited, the Ariabona and Obiora case,
Yes.
that definition is clear. You can't approach something objectively. There's an element of defensiveness now, isn't there? Because they've been called to question their own judgment. You cannot question your own judgment successfully, I don't feel.
Well, however, I mean, in principle, the judges are expected to be always above board.
Like Caesar's wife.
Like Caesar's wife.
But they're
and to
human.
discharge their assignment, impartially and with fairness, equity, and ensure that justice is done.
Yeah, but
that is the principle.
But the same Supreme Court is the one who said it should be a fresh panel because they know their limitations. They're human.
Every case, has its own peculiarity. And election cases, as we're told, are sui generis. What we should not encourage is a situation whereby litigants will be in a position whereby they can intimidate the court, and not to even, in this case, refer to Supreme Court justices. But I think, and I expect, that when their lordships sit, they should take special notice of this, matter that has been raised, if it is raised before them by counsel, and then they can decide. But I don't think that we should encourage any situation whereby Supreme Court justices can be intimidated by litigants, because there will be no end to it.
Yes. Is the danger from litigants?
Yes, because also...
Dr. Abati.
What,
those the ones intimidated?
Robert, what the PDP and its candidate, Ihedioha, are asking for is to review the case. The Supreme Court should review its verdict. But on the eve of this case being looked at, PDP has suddenly come up with this, oh, we don't trust that you'll be fair. And if you juxtapose it with the Oputa's principle of finality and fallibility, which you quoted earlier, I think it will make more sense if the same group of justices look at this case and see where perhaps there is a fault. It will show indeed that, yes, they are not infallible.
Well, Supreme Court justices are not politicians, and we do not expect them that in discharging their professional responsibility, they would, for any reason whatsoever, descend into the arena. And I think that, you know, if these justices, the same panel, take another look at the case, at the end of the day, we will all be here to look at the arguments that they put forward. And there will be a review, both in the court of public opinion and by professionals of whatever they come up with. So I think we should allow the Supreme Court to do its work. And as I said earlier, we should not dictate to the judiciary. It's not the role of litigants to insist on how panels should be constituted.
Okay, I think let's leave it at that and move on. By the end of the day, we'll know where we stand on this subject. Now, the Guardian newspaper, lead story, Buhari presidency cracks. Mongono, Kyari, locked in fierce battle of supremacy. Service chiefs warned against taking orders from the chief of staff. How chief of staff hijacked presidential power. Revelation validates call for Buhari's resignation, says PDP. Expectedly. But also, the Daily Trust is reporting the same story as their lead story for the day. Crack in Buhari's team as NSA accuses Kyari of sabotage, infighting dangerous for Nigeria, ex-military officer, presidency mom. Now, if you read the Guardian's opening paragraphs, they couldn't resist the temptation of almost writing an opinion. And I just read the first two paragraphs. The science...
You are editing the editor of the
Guardian.
No,
I'm not editing.
No. You have the right. You are a very senior editor in the business.
You can't help it, Mr. President.
You can, of course.
Yes. He said the signs have always been there. Interagency rivalry, uncoordinated national security, and other policy missteps, discordant tunes on all matters, and a hardly coherent presidency. That is the first part.
That's not news. That's opinion. So I see where you're coming from.
They couldn't help but editorialize in that way. Then yesterday, the bungling contraption that the Muhammadu Buhari presidency has become over time.
That's another opinion.
Advertise itself publicly with the fight between the National Security Advisor, Baba Mogundu, a retired Army General, and the Presidential Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari. Now, don't look at the reporters. I know, I worked at the Guardian. Leave the names of the reporters.
Tell me the story.
They have a very sound sub-desk who have done great work on that.
Well.
Yes, we know that. Now, for once, when I heard this news yesterday, I said, oh, I hope this is one of those stories we'll get before dawn. I will get a response from the presidential spokesperson to say we shouldn't trust fake news.
That's highly optimistic of you.
That's what I was expecting.
I know, right? That is very optimistic.
This, according to the story, of course, reported by two online publications, Sahara Reporters and Premium Times, referred to it as a leaked memo written by the National Security Advisor, Babagana Mongono. Yes, and if you read quotes from that memo, the assumption is that the Chief of Staff has assumed the position of the commander-in-chief and is now giving instructions to the service chiefs, the chief of defense staff, and perhaps that is why we are where we are in the security matters.
Okay, can I comment on this a bit?
Yes.
I mean, the chief of staff to the president is a very important functionary, just as the national security advisor. The national security advisor, when he's allowed to do his job, is basically in charge of national security. But we've had cases in the past when there was conflict between maybe the Minister of Defense or the service chiefs and the national security advisor. So they're both very strategic positions. Two, it's not unusual that there will be rivalry in the palace. It's about the politics of power. Persons around the president are oftentimes in an attempt either to overreach themselves or to upstage themselves, find themselves in this kind of situation. And who are some of the key persons around the president? It includes the chief of staff, the national security advisor, the secretary to the government of the federation, and then you have, in some cases, the secretary, the private secretary to the president, called PSP, the chief of staff of the federation, and then some key ministers. There are super ministers, there are small-scale ministers, even if that is not a constitutional thing. More strategic ministers will be the Minister of Petroleum, the Minister of Finance.
There's no Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State.
The Minister of Interior, and also the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, who is the only minister that is recognized in the Constitution. So you find this happening again and again. But the Chief of Staff of to the President, it's a recent creation. That office was created by President Obasanjo in 1999. Previously, what you had was the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and the Personal Secretary to the President, the PSP. But let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll try to dissect this further. We'll be right back. It's still the morning show here on Arise News. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us, reviewing the headlines of newspapers around the world is Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Yes, Efeni, before we went on break, I was trying to offer a description of the power architecture.
The power structure.
Within the, well, architecture is a famous phrase.
Yes,
and a notorious phrase in
since
Nigeria.
this matter has to do with security also.
Within the presidency. And the point here is you have the national security advisor saying that the chief of staff is doing his job, right? So you have rivalry among persons who are around, the key persons who are around the president. There's also the problem always of territoriality. So what the national security advisor is saying is that the chief of staff should not do his job. Now, is he in a position to define the role and functions of the chief of staff? I don't think so. The chief of staff is, he provides both bureaucratic and political, functions to the president. He's the gatekeeper. He arranges all meetings. He's the interface between the president and the ministers and other officials of state. He manages the president's correspondence. Every memo to the president goes through him, and he breaks it down for the president in a manner that is accessible and can be easier for the president. He coordinates every principal officer of the president, and so on and so forth. Now, he's the engine room, he's the gatekeeper, he's the eyes and ears of the president. However, anybody within the presidency of Nigeria is only as powerful as the president makes you. You can be a special advisor and be more powerful than even a service chief. It's the president, and every presidency has its own style. So this issue shows a crack, within this presidency, rivalry, territoriality. I think it's only a matter that can be resolved by the president himself, because you are only as powerful as the president makes you. And constitutionally, the president has the powers to delegate authority as he deems fit. I do not imagine that the chief of staff, if indeed it is true, that is dabbling into the territory of the national security advisor, can do so on his own without the proper authorization of the president.
Ruben, you are trying to give this in a very fine coloration as somebody who has been in government. this thing is not as nice as you are trying to put it. Okay. Look at this.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Since you have been in government, I want to know whose head is going to roll for the fact that a memo stamped confidential is all over the internet. What's going to happen with that?
Well, you know that government is also about human beings, and it's an embarrassment that classified documents, get leaked. In fact, at a point, it became so embarrassing that even if you had an ordinary conversation within the villa, you will be surprised where that will be echoed. All kinds of booster stations. So it's a breach of security. But the security people, it's their job to investigate a matter like this. How did a private memo, an official memo, get onto the pages of newspapers? But, as citizens, we'll say, well, it's good for us.
No, yeah, we want to know.
Because we want to know. But we want to know what goes on all the time.
Given the content now, the issue is not how it got leaked and all that.
Yes.
It's gone beyond that.
That's my issue.
No, I agree. I'm just saying that what is at stake now is beyond that. Because we are talking of the fight against insecurity in the country.
Yes.
And look at what we are hearing. As a professional, you are aware that the security of the Federal Republic of Nigeria requires concerted and centralized effort taking into account internal, external, and diplomatic factors, which means somebody who is not conversant with all this seems to be doing that. Now, look at this other sentence.
Yes.
Pursuant to the foregoing, you are by this letter directed to desist from these illegal acts that serves nothing but the continuous undermining of our national security framework.
Meetings with diplomats, security chiefs, and heads of agencies.
So the chief of staff
but
can
what
meet,
you're saying is that he might have been asked to do just that.
Well,
yes.
Okay.
And he cannot look.
You see, in all
President Obasanjo had the most powerful chief of staff since 1999. That was General Muhammad. I think General Abdullahi Muhammad from Kwara State. He was effectively on the ground, and nobody would dare challenge him. You can only be as powerful as the president makes you.
Yes, Ruben, we are talking about national security, and we have a crisis of insecurity in the country.
All of them,
with all these intrigues and infighting,
all of them are
claiming territory in the presidency.
These two persons
at the expense of the security fight against insecurity.
No, we cannot be judgmental in this matter.
I don't think so.
The two of them are holding their positions at the pleasure of the president.
So,
right?
we should hear from the president.
It's not unusual for the chief of staff to meet with diplomats, to meet with anybody.
Yes.
But he acts only on behalf of the president. If he goes on a frolic of his own, the president will fire him.
Yes, but Ruben,
and it's not for the National Security Advisor. If the National Security Advisor has any concern, he should direct that concern to the president.
But if there's anybody who should know about command structure when it comes to military matters, the president, a retired general. So if, assuming, as you are trying to put it, the chief of staff is getting directive, he couldn't have been acting on his own. Is somebody not undermining the structure within the military in this fight?
This is not a military matter. This is a governance matter.
I think really by
a situation where the army chiefs, they are now taking orders from the chief of staff instead of national security
proxy of the president. By now, we have to accept that this is the president's style. This, for me, I don't find it shocking at all. This is how he operates.
We need to hear
this is his style.
From the president or the presidency.
No, don't worry. The presidency does not owe anybody an explanation. It's a matter for the president to resolve.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, these are two principal officers of the president.
Okay.
And if they are quarreling, it's for the president to resolve it because they are his staff.
Yes.
They are exercising delegated authority.
There's nothing new about this. I think there's a lot of denial about this situation.
Well, I don't want to bring Aisha, who said some people have hijacked Buhari's government. Maybe that happened the first term, maybe not now. But let's just leave the matter.
Why would anything change?
But that was to do with...
because in the second term, the president came out clearly to say, all ministers report to my chief of staff.
Exactly. So I'm saying,
but that instruction was not there in the first term.
But that's what I'm saying. Why are you surprised by this?
Okay.
He's given them more powers.
Didn't the same Aisha come out to say Malam Garba takes instructions takes instructions from the chief of staff and not her husband? This is not surprising to me.
Well, Ruben has said it. The president gives power, delegates power to whom he wishes.
But we've always spoken as well about the powers of the...
Yes. Let's move on to just one story from Nigeria. Vanguard newspaper, killing of farmers by herdsmen. 8 corpses exhumed in Delta for investigation. This happened in Delta State, close to my village. But when this happened, the community said 8 persons were killed by these herders. And you know what? The commissioner of police in Delta State, and his name is Afiz Inuwa, came out to say, no, it's only one person. Proof, show me the evidence. And of course, the community went ahead to exhume the bodies of these persons because they have to bury their dead.
But why would they lie?
But because the commissioner of police, Inuwa, Afiz Inuwa, said, no, they couldn't have killed 8 people, only 1. So show evidence. So they had to exhume the body.
That's so bad.
Instead of the police commissioner mobilizing, in fact, the state governor was very angry over this incident. The Robo Progress Union, the umbrella social cultural organization,
of which you are a member,
yes,
by DNA,
yes, also protested, but they had to exhume these bodies.
Isn't that awful?
Awful.
Awful.
So now that the commissioner has seen the bodies, I hope he will go ahead and apprehend those herders who have been lurking in the bushes in Delta State, in Ikairia, in Ogwashuku, in Uroboland. They are all dead, terrorizing the villagers.
We discussed this yesterday.
Yeah.
When the president said in Katsina, well, regarding Katsina, that people shouldn't take matters into their hands, they should report to the security agencies. When security agencies insist on downplaying tragedies, this is why people feel compelled to act.
Exhuming bodies. It's absolutely tragic.
Ruben,
it's completely unacceptable.
You are not commenting on my homestead?
No, I mean, you've said it. I mean, it's an unacceptable situation, you know, very untidy. But should we be surprised?
No.
No.
This is what we get.
We should be surprised, but we can't be surprised.
Yes,
that's what's
par for the course, unfortunately.
You know?
Well, let's just move over to the foreign newspapers. The Guardian newspaper, new advisor to number 10 resigns over race and intelligence controversy. Andrew Sabisky, the young guy who was recruited recently by Dominic Cumming, who was looking for people with crazy ideas to work with the new prime minister.
No, people can think out of the box.
Yeah, it's crazy ideas.
He said all kinds of absolute nonsense. That Dominic Cumming.
And this fellow is saying that the IQ of blacks are certainly lower than that of whites.
Yes.
Went on to say those who are still asking for, who are looking for, who collect, what do you call it now in UK, handout from government? Welfare should be limited to the number of children they can give birth to, and all kinds of stuff from him. And in the face of this criticism, no comment from the Prime Minister's office.
Well, he's racist himself,
Exactly.
But he says things like watermelon smile.
Well, he has been saved the because he had to resign.
Well, he has had to pay the price for being politically incorrect.
Yes, you can think it, apparently, but you mustn't
but when you
say
voice it out, it becomes
it's a problem. Yes.
Well,
Emmanuel Efeni, looks like we don't have more time left. Do we still have
one story?
Yes, the Financial Times of UK, Financial Times, Britain will never allow oversight of laws. Brexit chief tells Brussels. Now, David Frost, the UK negotiator, he said, look, we are not going to be under any kind of supervision after in the trade negotiation. And they are insisting that trade negotiation will end by the end of this year.
By December, yes.
Yes, by December. Now, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, is also laying the ground for some tougher talks. But we'll see how it pans out. The negotiation will go on for quite some time.
Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel Efeni.
Thanks,
We'll continue tomorrow.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.